what you're excelling at now to a moment in time in your life where I'm sure things got pretty shit scary. Being diagnosed with cancer. I'm very excited to welcome Clint Bizzell onto the show. Now, I know that your playing days is something that you're very proud of, but there's probably a whole host of your life that has been even more enjoyable, fruitful in many ways. So I'm looking forward to digging a little bit deeper into that. But from a background, from a footy point of view, I know that the draft was different back in 1995.
Yeah, very different.
But it did say you were picked 75. I don't even know how the draft worked back then, but let's just say you were drafted in 1995. You played 163 games across both the Cats, who I grew up barracking for, and the Ds.
Yeah.
You went to the Ds in 2001 and then retire in 2007.
That's correct.
But you originally grew up in Queensland.
Correct.
And the old man was a pretty handy player, played over 200 games in
Yeah.
the QAFL.
Yeah, 226.
Also found out he can barefoot too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he loved his skiing as a young fella. So,
And you're the eldest of 5 kids. Mum and
Yeah.
dad, great relationship. What was the upbringing in the Bizzell household like?
it's pretty
up in
manic.
Queensland. Yeah.
One of 5, even though my youngest brother's 16 years younger than myself, which is incredible. But you know, as
Can we just go to that dynamic? Because I've always been amazed by people. I have 3 kids myself, and that's full on. And I
Yeah.
always have this increased appreciation for anyone who goes beyond 3.
Yeah.
But given your youngest brother was 16 years younger, did you play like an element of a fatherly role or mentor role from an early age because there was such an age gap? And did that help your parents with regards to just being mum and dad?
I'm sure that I did, but it's probably the one of the things that was one of the toughest decisions, you know, that I had to deal with, especially after getting drafted, because I left home at 19. So, which was again a couple of years later than when you could get drafted. But I essentially kind of left home, and he was only just, you know, really quite young. So, which now on reflection, like, we're really close. But as the eldest of 5, and leaving home to pursue your dream, I'm leaving home, you know, leaving my youngest brother, which was really quite difficult. But I had, I suppose, bigger fish to fry, and I was chasing a dream. But you know, that was just something that you kind of learn to deal with. And you know, mum, you know, you talk about, you know, what was life like back at home in Brisbane. It was incredible. I mean, I had an unbelievable upbringing. You know, both mum and dad, really hardworking people. Essentially, like, they're still working. My dad's like 78, and he's still working. Sometimes I think he's a little bit crazy. It's kind of like, you know, he's got a mechanical service station, you know, petrol, fuel, tyres, you know, mechanical repairs. But
And does a lot of the hands-on work himself?
Yep.
Still to this day?
Still to this day.
Do you think as people get older, and I think my parents are getting to that stage where you either keep doing what you're doing or you do slow down, do you think it helps with just, you know, sharpness with their mind? Obviously, your old man, I assume, is still very fit with regards to doing the hands-on work. Like, there's an element of needing to have something in your life to keep living your best life.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of, you know, he's got real purpose, you know, and for me, that's what I kind of tend to see. Even though there's moments where I'm like, mate, you need to slow down. Like, he comes home and he's like, you know, when I talk to him, he's just like, yeah, I'm starting to get tired. It's like, well, no shit. Yeah. You know, you're really you're still doing a lot of the heavy lifting, a lot of the work, you know, like, he's repairing on cars, you know, he's lifting tires, he's doing all that.
It's super physical.
Absolutely. But for him, it's a real purpose. And the last thing that I'd want to do is take away, that from him, like being, this inconsiderate son saying, mate, you got to slow down and this is ridiculous. It's like, no, you need to do what you feel is best, as long as it doesn't, for me, take away from, I suppose, what him and mum want to do, because mum is keen to travel, but in a sense, like she's still working herself. So here I've got these two role models that have just been able to, show, 5 kids, what life is all about. And, it's kind of like, one of those key pillars was just through sheer hard work. And for me, I'm eternally grateful for having them as role models in being younger, because that's what kind of paved the way for me and what I did, past that particular point.
We'll touch on travel because you're the expert. We'll also touch on what you're doing now and how some of maybe what your mum and dad have taught you along the journey, but also other parts of your journey has allowed you to be so good at what you do now.
Yeah. This is really quite uncomfortable because I'm usually the one asking a lot of the questions, right? So having to kind of sit here and answer them is, a different position. But let's see how this goes.
Okay, very good. Was there any key moments through your actual playing career that have defined or changed who you are in some way, shape or form?
I'm sure there are many, because I think, the amount of variables that happen throughout a 12-year career and changing clubs, loss of form, confidence, injuries, like all of those are just, opportunities to overcome obstacles. Like for me, that's how I kind of look at it. And I think everything is teaching you something. Right, every opportunity. It's kind of like, that's how the way in which I see it. So all of those instances, like, if I reflect, being drafted to Geelong, I was like you said, the 75th pick. I think it was like 77 picks in that draft. I didn't even listen to the draft.
Yeah, right.
So
because you weren't expecting to be drafted, or
I think it was my, I think it was my second or third year that I'd applied for the draft. I missed out in that kind of Teal Cup year. When you represent your state, I was a little bit injured and wasn't able to play, my best footy. And then I had to play another 2 years of senior football, which I think prepared my body and my mind for AFL football. And I think that was part of, I think being able to handle a lot of those challenges. And I think, coming to the club, like I arrive at Geelong Football Club, they're in a grand final in 95. They lose because they lost a couple, in that era. And I'm walking into a football club being the last sort of out of 8 chosen, and, managed to kind of scrape out 4 games, got dropped after each one. And then in my second year, didn't play a game because I had a patella tendon injury, and I thought that was it. I thought that, my career was over. And then again, got a 1-year deal and managed to eke out these like 17 or 18 games, and then started to really find my feet.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of those, different challenges, they just kind of make you who you are. And it then comes back to, what are your values? What do you grow up with? What do you take with you? And for me, that's where, my parents really, come to the fore, because as those role models, that's what they kind of show you the way. And that's why I say I'm really grateful for what they were able to show me.
Yeah. You're a long way from home, being Queensland, down on the Bellarine Peninsula in Geelong. You gloss over the fact that, you don't play a game in your second year, and you start to wonder, well, maybe that's it, and who knows what's next kind of thing. But you get to pretty dark, having experienced those kind of thoughts myself with injury and that. You get to a pretty dark place. Do you think, that perspective you've spoken of, did you always have that, or is that something you've started to understand as you've got a little bit older and more mature? Yeah. Or was it always something that was like, well, this is just here to teach me something?
I think I was really lucky because, you know, my mum was someone, and dad to a certain extent. So you've got these, you know, two role models. You know, my father represents kind of like, you know, this driven, strong, not very vulnerable.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think I've ever seen him cry or anything, you know, like his voice will quiver when there's really emotional moments within our family. And we've definitely had some of those, like, you know, throughout our time, you know, as a family, and, you know, challenging times. I'm happy to share with one of those. I mean, look, one of my younger brothers fell off a motorbike and was in a coma for about 13 days.
Wow.
And he got flown to Newcastle Hospital, John Hunter Hospital. I remember it. It was kind of like at the end of 2021. I think it was like...
How old was he at the time?
He'd just finished school.
Yeah.
And he went fruit picking with a couple of his mates, never ridden a motorbike, decided to jump on a motorbike without a helmet, and came off. Yeah, got flown to John Hunter, and I still remember it. I just got traded to Melbourne and received a phone call that no one wants to receive, and I just flew straight to Sydney, hired a car, drove about 3-4 hours, and I was the first one to get there because my parents were driving down from Brisbane with the other kids, you know, in the car, and there he is, the tubes, you know, hanging out of his mouth, unresponsive.
So there was every chance that you thought maybe your brother wasn't going to be with you moving forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you know, even seeing your parents kind of deal with that scenario, I think you know, it kind of shines a light on who they are as people, and they both responded really differently. You know, my mum was just up there every day. You know, my dad just couldn't move, and not that there's anything kind of wrong with that, but it was just how do you kind of, you know, show up in those circumstances. And then look, he opened his eyes on Boxing Day. And look, you know, fast forward, he's married, he's got 2 kids, he works with my father at service station. Sometimes he can be a real pain in the ass. No,
so he's definitely back.
He's back. So, but again, when you think about challenging circumstances and the way in which you know, your parents can, you know, role model those, and what are the lessons that you learn, right? So for me, I think I was really you know, I was really lucky in having, I suppose, a mum that was always believed in growth.
Yeah.
Like really believed in it. And I think as the firstborn, you know, you just kind of got thrust into that, you know. And so it was always all about this, you know, thinking positive. It was kind of like, you know, I'd be, you know, sometimes on the holidays, you know, mum's just sit me and watch Oprah. And there's all these different stories about people that are overcoming these odds, and then I got into kind of, you know, reading, you know, Chicken Soup for the Soul, and you know, all these sort of self-growth books, which kind of set me on a path to where I am now. But I could see early on, you know, where that started from.
Yeah. Do you have a favourite book from a self-growth point of view?
My gosh. Some of the early ones, I think, you know, really kind of was just like, wow, just really opened up your eyes. I think the title is You Don't Have to Be Born Brilliant.
Yep.
Which was something that was just like, oh, so you mean people can learn these skills? You know, you can, you know, through, you know, rewiring your neural pathways, you can actually, you know, achieve really great things. And, you know, I started to kind of think about some of these moments, you know, throughout my life that have really impacted me. And then I got exposed to, you know, Commonwealth Games in Brisbane.
Yep.
And here we are just jumping up and down on the couch, cheering home the green machine. And it was just phenomenal. Like I'd never experienced anything like it before. Like my whole body was just, you know, here we are cheering for Australia, and the entire family. It's almost like, you know, all barracking for the same football team, and they win a grand final. It was like that, and I just kind of was just overcome with this emotion and happiness and joy, and it was something that I just kind of wanted to keep recreating. So I got really curious about, what does it make it, what actually gets you to that point? How do you, it's almost like, well, to become, an Australian athlete, not only is there hard work and doing all the little things right and having a positive attitude and all these things. And all of a sudden, it just started to kind of make a little bit more sense to me, which again, started me off on a particular journey.
Yeah. Exceptional.
Mm.
Transition-wise, so you finish up 2007.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your acting career going into Neighbours. I'm intrigued. Initially, was it a five-week slot as Adam Clark?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Did you have aspirations to go into acting? Was it something that someone said, "Oh, you know what? I think you'd go pretty good at that"? Was it just an opportunity and you were like, "What the hell? Let's have a crack"?
No. So for me, I had two great loves. I had, I loved football and I loved speech and drama.
Yeah, right.
So for me, which again, being in, I suppose, the football world, they're almost complete opposites. But for me, early on, is just incredible space to express myself. And especially in speech and drama in primary school, it's almost like, oh wow, I just loved having fun and kind of going into these different characters. And for me, that was a real outlet.
Yeah.
And then through high school, I studied drama, and it just captured me. And then film, and then because I would. In watching a film, it was incredible to me to watch the actor disappear and watch the person disappear. And then there was all these layers. And again, you think about, what I do now, and it kind of all makes sense. But I was really interested in how, how characters develop and who you are as a person. Shows up on that particular screen. So for me, I had a fascination. I had a fascination with film, and so probably just towards the end of my journey at Geelong, I started to seek out acting classes, and often drive to Melbourne and back, and during the week.
Yeah. And
then for the last 6 years while I was at Melbourne, I studied every Tuesday night. So I got really serious. Yeah, to the point where one of my teammates would kind of like, I was experimenting and experiencing, all these different characters and, different scenes that I was almost like coming to training, like he thought I looked homeless. Like I was like in really just absolute bland, run down clothes, but I was kind of just like really experimenting and kind of, with this whole other side to who I was. I mean, during the week, I would, in certain scenes, I'd be, all these different characters. Some of them would be dress up.
Yeah.
Some of them would be like, going to sort of deep, dark places. Sometimes I'd be bawling my eyes out on Tuesday night, and then, like going through the rigors of AFL football on a weekend.
Yeah.
So it was this, unbelievable space. And then I even studied after I'd finished footy. I went over to America and studied for about a month, actually just before I finished. So it was really a really serious path for me. I was kind of like locked in. I would watch film every week while I was playing two, 3 times. Yeah. So for me, I went right into it and loved it. Yeah, loved it. Loved characters and the transition and the contrast from where a scene would start and where it would finish, and the arc of a character and storytelling and all of this stuff. So for me, it was just a real escape, especially from footy.
Yeah, the everyday grind.
Yeah, but there were two of my kind of real loves. So that's where that started from. And then the opportunity came up where, I got an agent and, and then, landed a role on, it's actually, City Homicide, I think was first. I had a guest role on City Homicide, which was great because I knew Dan McPherson.
Yeah.
And so then I was able to kind of, just as part of my prep for that, being able to kind of chat with him about it. And then I was in a scene with him and Aaron Peterson, and it was very short and quick and over. And then I got the opportunity through Neighbours, and I had to audition. Saw Jan Russ, who was really well known.
Yeah.
Put that pathway to get into Neighbours, and got through the audition, and then did a 5-week stint. And literally by the end of it, I was really enjoying it, really enjoying that opportunity.
To the point where then with your partner Jen or Jennifer,
Jen,
do a travel show.
Yeah, Places We
Go. Then wrote a book of the 100 best places in Australia. Is that correct? Or bucket list?
Yeah, the top 100 places to go in Australia. Yeah.
I mean, that's going to be a lot of fun in the early days, I assume, of your relationship. Relatively early days, was it?
Yeah, fairly early. Yeah.
And that's why you're now the travel expert, and you can give your mum some tips on where to go.
Oh yeah, pretty much. But again, I think when you're thinking about things, as part of that transition out of football, and then being in a relationship with Jen, and then Places We Go was actually one of the most incredible experiences of my life, because I got to not only I travelled the world. I've been to every continent. We travelled around Australia with 2 cars, 2 caravans, 2 mother-in-laws, 30,000 kilometres on a 5-month trip.
Wow.
But I got to do what you're doing now. I got to facilitate and sit in, and do that and ask questions and find out, why people do the things that they do all over the world.
It's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah. And for me, that just kind of, not only was it incredibly, I got to see different places, but the people that I met were the real heroes of the show. And for us, that was the premise of it, really bringing out those heroes, those local heroes in what they did. And for me, I got to develop, I suppose, really key skills in active listening, being present, being able to kind of present, but also produce people. Yeah. And for me, I really loved that. And to climb Kilimanjaro and not nearly make it, and needing the support of our guides, Kasim and his brother Joffrey, to go to the Antarctic Peninsula and see that, and be on Danko Island and, be surrounded by wildlife and penguins coming up to your feet, to swimming with whale sharks. I mean, it's been quite extraordinary, and that is purely just is started, from Jen, my partner, who left a really steady, job, but wanted to always, branch out and do something different, and I suppose supporting her as part of that was exceptional. Yeah.
Speaking of Jen, and then 2 kids. Names?
Charlie. And
she's
Harry.
16.
Yeah, Charlie's
16 and a half.
16 and a half.
And then Harry.
And Harry, who's 8.
I'm assuming living 2 very different worlds currently, based on the age difference, and one being female and one being male.
Yeah.
How has being a dad changed you in the way that you live your life and the way that you show up? And if you had to nominate one of your greatest strengths, what would it be?
Okay, I'll go the first one. So how has it changed me? Well, I've had to learn a lot of patience, because I tend to be someone that likes to action things really quickly. That's kind of like the way that I'm wired. Like if I've got an idea, I just want to implement it straight away. And I can sometimes go too fast. It's just like, it's like if I think back to sort of, footballing days, it's like, how can I get better at this? And I'll just be out in the backyard and I'll just be like doing it over and over and over again. How do you bounce a ball on your left hand? Right. So for me, it was always like that repetition was always a way to get better. So I've had to learn, patience, and, I've had to, where do you start? In being a dad, I've got to catch myself sometimes. I've got to learn how to, hold those guardrails up, and not be too directive. I kind of catch myself out. I mean, I'm teaching my daughter how to drive a car at the moment. Ooh. And I've got to be really careful on how I do that. So I catch my...
For two reasons. You don't want her to crash.
Yeah,
but also
correct.
You want her to have the freedom to learn and grow in her own way, right? And feel like she's in control. And I started reading a book about teen girls in particular, given mine are about to transition to that phase. And apparently the one bit of feedback that all girls give either their therapists or their parents is that they always feel like their parents don't think that or they have the answers or they know the answers, and they kind of do it for them. Mm-hmm. I assume that's part of the challenge when you're driving a car or sitting next to your daughter driving a car.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you can't get any more kind of, dangerous situation. And, whether it's just making sure she stays in the lane.
Yeah.
And just trying to give her these hints. But I know that, she's just like, she just gives me the evils, or she tells me, when I'm kind of, being a bit too over the top. But I'm trying to educate her, Trent.
Yes.
I'm trying to just educate her as best as I can. Yeah.
Fine balance.
And I know instinctively, even with what I do now as a coach, but you got to let people come to their own conclusions, and but you try and lead them there. And it's very difficult, especially in this scenario, because both of our lives are at stake.
It's pretty significant.
It's pretty significant kind of activity that you're doing. And I want to make sure that, we have a long life together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
you've touched on coaching, and that's obviously what you find yourself doing from a day-to-day point of view now.
Yeah.
Executive coaching, but then also helping them get the best out of their team or perform at their best.
Yeah.
Was it always something that you thought you would go into, or was it just part of, life's given you all these lessons and moments in time, and you've realized that it's something that you're hugely passionate about and very good at?
I wouldn't change anything, but if there was one thing that I could probably go back, and but it didn't appear to me at this point in time. So, and what I'm talking about is playing football, and what I could have studied. I would have loved to have studied psychology, like on reflection, and it just wasn't there for me yet. I think I had to kind of, like I said, during my footballing career, I was studying acting, and I think that was a way of just really trying to self-express and really get to understand who I was. And then it was only later that it really came to me. And then if I think about all of the things that I've read, all of the way in which I see life, the way in which, my point of view of how to grow, how to develop, how to excel, for me that, has come from, not only a mother and father supporting me, my mother kind of, pushing me in that regard. I just have an innate way of always looking for growth in anything that, we do. And as I started to kind of look at that, it wasn't until, I dare say, towards the, probably 2013, 2014, I started to get that itch that I needed to scratch when it came to coaching. And then it was like, well, and I was we were traveling the world and kind of producing and presenting, the TV travel show. I was like, okay, well, I think it's time. And that's when it started to come to me about that.
I know I've suffered from this in my journey as I transition into the next phase, and it's definitely something that I'm passionate about.
You're only quite, like, how far are you out? You're only like, this is your...
about 18 months now.
Like you're such a baby in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it's, and
I'm in no rush, but I do want to be curious and learn. And I think something for me, and I'm not sure if it's something that's why I'm asking, but that element of imposter syndrome when you walk into an office where there is a CEO or a business owner that has 100 or 200 people working for them. And that's not something I assume you had experienced in your time, but then you're employed or engaged to come in and give them advice.
Mm-hmm.
How did you overcome that sense of what the hell, or how do I have any right to be here and advise based on his experience or her experience?
The word advice is actually a really interesting word that you used. And what I've come to learn is I don't have to give any advice.
Yep. Can you explain that more?
So I've got a range of experiences, and the context of my life is, born and bred in Brisbane, Queensland, mother and father, sort of got, even from, if you talk about blue collar background, seeking growth. I've had all these experiences high performing as an elite athlete, traveled the world, managing remote teams across the world, dealing with parts of that team who are double my age. Cameramen, a lot of the cameramen that we used were double my age. So I've got this whole experience in front of me when it comes to the life that I've lived, and the training that I've put myself through. So when I come into certain organisations or deal with leaders or teams, it's about me asking particular questions that lead them to the own answers. But early on, I did think I had to give advice.
Yeah.
So for me, it's about, changing that dynamic where I don't really need to give any advice at all, but that can only really come from time.
Yeah.
Which I dare say is potentially, is probably one of the things that you could be wrestling with.
Yeah. How
can I be of most value to others by sharing what I've been through and being able to give advice so that others can thrive? Like, that's what I kind of hear.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because for me, even just in the initial phase, I did a bit of work with the Brisbane Lions last year. You walk in there and you kind of, in your head, how do I be captain but not be captain again? And it was like, no, this is totally different.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm here to listen, hear. And then I started to reflect on my own journey, and I know that there's a lot of CEOs, business people, anyone in any kind of leadership role that feel like it's a lonely place because you don't want to burden anyone or look like things are out of control. So I think sometimes just being the sounding board and then helping people understand what they're going through your own experiences, and it doesn't have to be the same, but it could be something that they're navigating that then go, oh yeah, that actually makes sense for me. And then they go and implement it. You are empowering others, and it's kind of like, that's when it's most beautiful, is when they have the realization, then they go and execute and they go, wow, like I didn't even think I was capable of doing that. And it's not on the basis of you giving them the answers. It's actually helping them search for them and finding them themselves. Yeah. That's what I've loved about the transition from being captain, which I think in some regards is what you were doing as a captain of a footy club, and the same goes for business leader as well. But that journey for me has been significant in just learning on how it looks and how it should feel, because it is very different.
Oh, it's a different dynamic.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the most difficult transition that I had, especially with what I do now, is I lived and breathed high performance, but to coach it is something completely different. Completely different. So I had to go from the doer to the one that facilitated, and I suppose the analogy I like to use is, you got a sort of the bowling alley, and I sort of hold up the guardrails. So I'm going to be able to lead you to where you feel you best might need to go. I'm going to share some stories because stories are
powerful,
incredibly powerful. As far as inspiring people, and they deliver, some of the best mental models for behaviour. And that's where I think, if this is an area that you're wanting to kind of go into, that, you can share stories and share experiences that are similar, that hopefully people can take something from that they can then implement. But again, it's, not only were you a player, you were sort of a captain of a football club, that conduit between coach and captain, and then also players.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, to kind of flip the script on that is a lot of sort of, parking the ego.
Plenty
right?
of it.
Yeah. And how do I help others? But that's what you're kind of doing right now. You're allowing people to kind of share their story, and you're facilitating that. So that's part of the journey.
Well, that is part of the purpose of the podcast.
Yeah.
Couple of quick fire ones just to kind of encapsulate how you would begin the journey, or maybe just if there's someone out there that is an aspiring business leader in their journey. In your experience, what qualities do the best leaders possess?
Courage, humility, and discipline.
Thank you. What's the number one thing you see holding leaders back? Aside from ego?
Fear.
Fear?
Fear in
and that's
all
born out of ego?
Look, fear in many different ways. Like we touched on fear of judgment, before. I think, that loss aversion, we do things sometimes because of what we're fearing that we might lose.
Yeah.
I think understanding fear, where I know I'm elaborating more on these quick fire questions, but I can't help myself.
It's beneficial.
But, actually, I'm going to go back. I think, fear, and I think people not knowing their own, knowing who they are, self-awareness. I think self-awareness is probably one of the key elements to any leader in community, business, life.
Do you think self-awareness helps with this next question? Because something I get asked a lot is, how do you find balance in fiercely wanting to grow and evolve from a business or work or career point of view, but then finding the balance of being a great mum or dad at home?
Sorry, what was that? What was the question again?
How do you find balance when you're fiercely trying to get ahead in career or progress, but still find balance in your family life or relationships or parenting?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always going to be certain. I think it really depends on what you prioritize. Like, what are your priorities? What are the things that you kind of that mean most to you?
Yeah.
And I think it's always something that whether it's particular leaders in organisations, whether it's particular leaders, community, whether it's even in sport, like you have this driving need to drive outcomes and achieve certain success, right? And so therefore there's a lot of things that kind of get put on the back burner, and sometimes what I see is that there's certain leaders of business that sometimes wake up and it's almost like, shit, it's too late. I've really kind of haven't paid enough attention to certain elements of my life because I was too busy driving in a particular direction. So that in itself is I think it's about prioritization. There's a great book called Essentialism by Greg McKeown.
Yeah.
Jot that one down. It's really good about trade-offs and prioritization. It's about focusing on the vital few as part of rather than the important many.
Yeah.
And what is that for you? And that comes down to even like your particular, tasks throughout the day, like those that can't say no, that aren't focusing on the right things, that are going to move either yourself forward, the team forward, or the business forward, can really suffer.
Yeah.
So you got to be really, again, if I refer it back to being an athlete and I said to you, what are some of the core elements that make you really successful footballer?
Yeah.
You'd say, well, you need to be fit, you need to sleep well, you need to make sure you're eating the right stuff. Like there's certain core elements that kind of, need to make sure that you're always training on your skills, whether they're your most positive or your deficiencies.
Yeah.
Like certain elements that you can only do because we've only got a finite amount of time.
Correct.
Time is the one element that we all share.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do with yours?
Appreciate that. Thank you. Hope everyone else was listening because I certainly was. Now I want to move from what you're excelling at now to a moment in time in your life where I'm sure things got pretty shit scary. Being diagnosed with cancer is a significant moment in anyone's world. What was that like for you and also your family? My understanding is that a mate of yours got diagnosed with bowel cancer, and his advice was, if something's just not feeling right, go and get it checked. And that's how you discovered prostate cancer?
Yeah. It was, I suppose for me.
That was in 2023?
Yeah. It was early 2023. And it was through a good friend of mine, David Flockhart. So he one of his kind of lasting legacies was, if anything's up, just go and get checked. Okay, and I think as men
we're reluctant to.
And I think of Jim Steins. Kind of like something that he didn't go and see the doctor early enough, right? So one of these, it's kind of like just always, and I'm someone that's kind of kept relatively healthy and fit, and I like to think that I kind of do most of the right things most of the time. So when things were a little bit off, I decided to just go to the GP, and especially with David's words ringing in my ear, and thank God I did, because it was, I've got to say, it's one of the most difficult things that for me and my, I suppose my family's had to kind of, work through. When you get a diagnosis, it's something that, it's like, it definitely hits you from, it's just like having it like a shadow box, or like something that you can't see. That's just kind of, somebody tells you there's something wrong that's deadly in your body, but you don't feel like it is really weird.
How has any form of your thinking or life changed since going through that? I mean, you were always glass half full and always, evolution, growth, progress. But I'm sure in those times where you are being told, there is something that could kill you inside of your body, it's pretty hard to dial up that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it kind of tests the very core of who you are. But there was a lot. Yeah, there was a lot that I learnt. Yeah, there was
any significant things that now you go, God, if I didn't go through that, maybe I wouldn't have that perspective?
I think, it's sometimes just the more simple things, like, don't sweat the small stuff. I mean, when you get a diagnosis like that, it's like, geez, just really puts things into perspective.
Yeah.
Find the joy
in everything.
Yeah, like just, you don't know how long you're going to be here for. So just, you got to enjoy yourself. Like, you got to laugh and you got to have fun. You got to live like no one's watching, like as in dance like no one's watching. It's just like, you got to really, really live. The support of family and friends, you can never underestimate that. Yeah. That's just, when you're in a position like that, and what comes out of people, for me, Jen was like an absolute rock. She's also like just researching and I suppose what people will do, to make sure that, that you feel okay is just extraordinary. Like just that humanness is is unbelievable to be kind of, a part of. So, and look, luckily for me, I was able to catch it early, and and there's too many stories. There's too many stories where that doesn't happen for people, and my heart goes out to them because I know what they're dealing with and I know what they're going through, and I'm, and it can be devastating.
Thank you for sharing. I'm sure it's not easy reflecting or talking about it.
No, it's still. I mean, it's obviously it's sort of 18 months, past.
How often do you have to be checked? Like, is
so
it ongoing?
typically, what picks it up is a PSA blood test.
Yeah.
So, so for me, and what I try and encourage, and I suppose the reason why I even decided to go public with it is that I wanted to obviously help others, and I couldn't have, and for me, because it was something that I got early, and thank God I did. But it can be as simple as a checkup. So blood test, PSA test. So if you've got family history, so I've got family history of prostate cancer on both sides of my family. And, it's something that I wish I got tested earlier. Typically you get tested around 50, but, I want to encourage people to get it tested as early as possible, just so you know.
Speaking of the testing, because I went through the E.J. Witten Foundation Cancer Centre there.
Yeah, Australian Prostate Cancer.
My understanding was that, and I'm sure that there's a lot of men out there that think that they have to have a finger up the bum to check your prostate.
Right, yeah.
That isn't the case.
No, because that doesn't actually pick it up. Like, it only...
Do you think that's why some men are kind of like, oh, no, I'm definitely not going in
there?
Look,
probably because it's it can be uncomfortable, and it can be, it can be awkward.
Yeah.
To be able to, to have that. But that only kind of, you're only really, I dare say, you're only feeling the part of the prostate, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't pick up, at the level of what a blood test does. So, give some blood, go in, get it checked, see what your levels are, and then you've got peace of mind.
Yeah.
So I always encourage, excuse me. I always encourage people to go and, get checked as soon as you can.
Yeah.
If there is family history, you want to be on top of that with anything, whether it's heart disease, whether it's anything that might be in your family. You want to be able to get on top of it as quickly as you can. So, yeah, for me now it's it's sort of 6 monthly testing, and then do that for a while, and then it'll be a lot longer, which will be fabulous.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that all things are good for the moment. And if you are listening, maybe go and get checked just to make sure that everything's in order as it should be. We do have a question that we like to wrap the show up, and I do appreciate you being with us today. But I suppose to reflect on some of the things, there's been so much wonderful wisdom that you've shared with us today. And one thing I've taken away is, that every single thing that happens to you in life is actually a moment for learning and teaching, and that's going to hold you in good stead in a moment in time. And it might be immediately, but it could also be a long way down the track. I think so many of us are caught up, and what you spoke of is that as part of that, you might be doing something that you don't necessarily love, or that you do love, and it's not a forever thing, but it is part of bridging together the attributes that you're going to need as you progress through life, and then you find your niche in whatever that is. Prioritization, something that I've had to learn to deal with, given my structure isn't done for me anymore. I've had to start to really dial up that. And then the final part for me was to don't sweat the small stuff. Like, life is difficult, but I think once you accept that it's difficult, it can be really beautiful. And that's when you start to really do enjoy and embrace those really small moments, as hard as they might be, like taking Charlie, your daughter, for a car lesson and holding back some of the feedback that you'd like to give because it's not going to be received well. But there's obviously a whole host of other bits of gold within our conversation. But the one we do like to finish on is, if there was one piece of advice that you could give your 16-year-old self, what would it be?
Gosh. In what kind of context? Are we talking for life? Is it kind of, I mean, because I'm kind of thinking back as a 16-year-old, what is it that I would most like to...
Well, so for an example, a really good friend of mine, he goes, I would love to have just heard that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Listen twice as much as you speak. Or it can be something that you think that if you had have heard at 16, maybe it would have helped with getting more out of a relationship or more out of a career path that you took or whatever it is. Or maybe you wouldn't change it. We have had a guest who said, I actually wouldn't change because of the lessons, which is obviously not the point of the question. So, so something would be good.
I think the thought that I had was like, as a 16-year-old, I know that I was kind of like really focused on wanting to play AFL. Like I knew that at the age of 6, that's what I wanted to do.
Yep.
So everything was kind of like, so I don't know how much I would listen to, somebody giving me some advice, but I think, the role of mentors and people that, you really align with can have a huge influence. And that's where I think, being a parent is really important. But if I was to think about my 16-year-old self, I think being able to share the journey and being able to open up a lot more. I dare say I was, very, very closed. And again, we touched on fear a little bit. And I think, the fear of not getting it wrong, the fear of being vulnerable, the fear of looking weak, that for myself was probably something that I just never wanted to open up. So for me, I suppose, it's probably around that and and asking more questions and being a bit more curious. But I dare say back then I was just like so driven.
Yeah.
And again, if I did open myself up, I dare say I would have felt like it's hindering my ability to chase my dreams. So it's but I dare say that kind of advice for life would have been something that I would have loved to have
from.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because, what you're doing now, being curious, right? Being curious in life because we don't know the answers. Being open, being vulnerable because here we are as these kind of weird individual things called humans just trying to make our way in the world. Yeah. Then, the more that you are open, the more questions that you can ask. I mean, I believe it's it allows you to kind of cut through and be able to keep moving forward.
Yeah. I had a thought just driving here today, and one thing that we often hear from ex-athletes is, I just wish I slowed down more and enjoyed it. Given the work that you do now, because I've been doing my head in about this, do you think that's part of what makes an athlete become successful? Like if I think about my own journey, and if I was to slow down and not want for some of the things that I wanted, I'm not sure I would have left no stone unturned and maybe got to the heights or the places that I possibly did. So it's a fine balance, isn't it? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. And I think only wisdom and going through, a lot of the, a lot of the failures kind of teaches you that. I mean, that's what wisdom is, right? It's kind of like failing in all these particular areas so that you can look back in hindsight to go, well, yeah, I wish I would have done something different. But in the moment, if you're able to keep kind of being able to learn from those experiences, I dare say that's what kind of sets you on that course. But yeah, absolutely. I don't think if you were, driven and taking every opportunity to kind of improve, that you may not even get to the spot where you get to, because you know what it takes.
Yeah. Well, thank you for firming up my thoughts.
But I think it definitely helps in kind of being, open, being, more human, connecting a lot more, because, if you've got someone that's completely driven in one particular area, yes, they're going to potentially achieve something, but there's a whole other area that they may It's probably got like that shadow side, that maladaptive side that needs a bit of work,
a bit of love as well.
Yeah.
Well, Clint, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and sharing your amazing insights through your journey and what's shaped you to what you're doing now, but also the human you are. I can tell that your partner, Jen, along with your kids, are very lucky to have you in their life, and I'm sure vice versa. But I do appreciate everything that you've shared with us, and look forward to watching you continue on your journey in helping others realise their potential.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for having me, mate. It's good to always sit down and reflect on, the journey to date, and what makes us who we are. So well done to you for creating this environment to have those discussions.
Thank you.